All right. So when we do the operations with I, in almost all cases, you can pretend that I is simply a variable, just like it's X. The only problem is if we get I squared at any time, we have to remember it's -1. So if I look here, literally I can pretend that I is a variable. So for example, I could write this as 4x plus a negative is -2 minus 5x. I could pretend it's just like a variable. So I would hope you could simplify this. So 3 minus 2 is 1, and 4x minus 5 is -x. So that would be my answer. So really, the only thing is I'm going to change this to an I and this to an I, which means it's 1 minus I. Let's see if you can do the next one. What you need to be careful is this is a negative, so it's 3 plus 6I minus 4, and that minus also goes here, so it's plus 2I, and then you would combine like terms. So 3 minus 4 is -1, 6 and 2 make 8I. You're not making more i's, it doesn't become I squared, because we're only combining like terms. Same thing here, when you combine the x's, it doesn't become the x squared. The only time you're going to get bigger or is when we multiply. So if I ask you to FOIL this out, take a second, pause the video and FOIL it out by yourself. Please don't wait for me to FOIL. You should absolutely be a FOILing pro at this time. 3 times 2 is 6I, 20I, 4 times 2 is 8, and now we have an issue because this is I times I, which is I squared. And that is where we're going to have an issue that we have to remember that we get I squared. So when I do this, this is I and this is I, which act just like a variable. So I'm going to get 15 plus 26. I'm going to put them together, I. It doesn't get bigger. It doesn't become I squared. And now what I have is 8, but I squared is -1. So now I get 15 plus 26I and then minus 8. And so now I combine 15 minus 8 is 7 plus 26I. Please remember, just like these, if they have x or any variable in them, you cannot combine them. So this would not become 20 or 30, whatever, for 33I. They don't go together, I's by itself. So if you would take a second and try this one. Go ahead and pause the video and try that one, please. So the first thing we have to remember is anything squared means to write it twice in mathematics. So I do that. And now 4 times 4 is 16, but I times I is I squared. When I get this, I get 9, 24I, and 16, but I squared is -1. 9 plus 24I minus 16, 9 minus 16 is 6. Just need to be careful on the computer. Seven. Sorry. Jeez. I knew that was off. Having a good day. Sorry. 7 plus 24I. For an absolute review, we already talked about this in the last set of notes, that if it's I is on the bottom, it's the same as having the radical -1. So to get rid of a radical, we multiply it by itself. Well, I can take I and multiply itself. I'm going to get I squared. And by definition, I squared is -1. So I multiply the top. Now I can write that as -4I because a fraction is fine. Same exact in B. The only thing is the 2 does not matter. It's a number. So this is 2 times -1 because that's I squared is -2 over 5I. Can't get any easier than that. The i's are not in groups, unlike this problem. So here we don't have a group. Here we have a group. And if I go back to our notes from the last section, let me, when we did radicals, we did a radical review and we did dividing radicals here. We went to the notes and we went to this and the difference of, here was an example. In this one, sorry, these two differences, when we looked at this, this was a group with a radical here. In this one, this was not a group. When it's not a group, you only focus on the radical. When it was a group, we used what you called a what? If you remember, conjugate. So conjugate is exactly the same thing, but we differ the signs in the middle because when we FOIL, the middle will go away. I simply come to something with a group, I have to use a conjugate, and it's the exact same thing. A conjugate always mirrors it, except the middle value changes because if I FOIL, I get -2i, but in the middle I get positive 2i. And I want that because I want them to go away, but don't forget the last term, which is positive times negative, so it's negative. And then I times I is I squared. You can't forget. Now, just be careful. The middles cancel. You have 4 minus, and I squared turns to what? -1. But be careful because you had a minus, a negative, which then becomes 4 plus 1. So the denominator of this, which was 2 plus I, comes out to be 5. Kind of crazy. Imaginary numbers are crazy, as in they are complex and they are imaginary. Okay? And whatever I do to the bottom, I must do to the top, which just gives me a 10 minus 5i. That is a great, great answer. You just need to be careful with fractions. If you have a number if you have a numerator, a group, one that can either be factored out, so out of the top, I could take a 5 and I'd get 2 minus I over 5. They will cancel. My answer is 2 minus I. You could also just realize that the 10, the 5, and the 5 all have a common value. So if I take a 5 out, it's 2 minus I. Great answer. I'd be really happy with this. The problem is if it was on an SAT or any standardized test, it's definitely going to give you a simplified answer like this. Kind of thing. You get so far, you just have to realize it simplifies. All right, let's try one more on your own and we're done with operations and we can practice together after this. All right, go ahead and try this one. You're going to realize it's a group because of the minus sign, so we know it's a conjugate, and start there, please, and get me what the denominator is, and then take it to the numerator. Pause the video. Okay, hopefully you came back and you got 9, 12i minus 12i, negative 16, I times I is I squared. Gone, gone, 9 minus 16 times -1, which is 9 plus 16. 9 plus 16 plus 10 is 26, 25 on the bottom. Hopefully you got that as a denominator. And then the numerator is, you got to be careful, that's 15i. That's 20i squared. I squared has to start ringing a bell, minus 20. Now again, you can see that the top factors with a 5 as well, 15 and 20, a 5 can come out, which gives me 3i minus 4 over 25, and then my front number can simplify. So 3i minus 4 over 5, 25. 5 over 25 simplifies. So hopefully you got it down. If you got here, this is a very good answer. Very good, especially that you got I squared, made yourself to get to 20. That's perfect. Just realize there is a chance it could factor out and simplify. That's it for I's and imaginary numbers. That's about as much as we're going to do with them till later when we get into the quadratics unit. And we'll talk about why they're a little bit important and why we have to study them. All right, thanks.